Now we're looking for $5.6 billion. It's like having a blank check with no strategy. The first thing we need to see is a long-term strategy that does not simply degrade ISIS, but that defeats ISIS. That means those details and the specificity within that plan must be presented to Congress so that we understand how the money is going to be used effectively so as to keep Americans safe around the world.
That was South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, one of several lawmakers who's questioning the president's request for more money to fight ISIS. This comes as the first U.S. troops arrive in Iraq, and we have 1,500 more troops who are part of this latest wave. Anbar province has been overrun by ISIS. Our troops are there to bolster Iraqi forces that have been so far outgunned by the Islamic terrorist army. I'm joined now by Arizona Senator John McCain on the Armed Services Committee. Of course, Senator McCain, it's really nice to have you in the studio today.
Tim Scott is exactly right.
Yeah.
He's exactly right. We need to have a strategy. There is not a strategy. And frankly, this gradual escalation that we're going through, remember the president for years has said, no, tell everybody what we're not going to do rather than what we're going to do. And as this gradual escalation reminds me of the Vietnam conflict. We have to have a strategy. The Congress and the American people need to know that. But it puts us in a difficult situation. Are we going to abandon this effort to defeat ISIS? So what we're going to do in the Senate Armed Services Committee, we're going to have hearings, and we're going to have the Secretary of Defense up and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs and others to explain to us how we're going to achieve the president's stated goal of degrading and ultimately defeating ISIS. Right now, they're not doing that.
Iraqi forces retook the oil refinery area near Beiji.
That's good.
That's good news. So the president seems to go back to these, sort of incremental victories along the way and say, look, it's working.
Martha, we're still fighting over Kobani, using the full weight of American air power. Fact is, we're not using the full weight of American air power because we don't have...
Is that what you would do?
I would have forward air controllers in there. I would have special forces on there. I know how alarming that might be, to identify the targets so that we can... You can't just defeat an enemy just by bombing them from the air. You have to have a ground component, but you also have to have forward air controllers who are identifying these targets, particularly when the combatants are in such close proximity to each other. Now we see in the front page of the New York Times this morning, this terrorist group in Egypt has, guess what, aligned themselves with ISIS. Radicals all over the Arab world are identifying with the success of ISIS and joining up. Their ranks are swelling as we speak. And again, this president does not have a strategy to win.
In your strategy, if you were in his shoes, would be a stronger air campaign.
I would have more forward air controls. I would have special forces. I would be sending in trainers so that we can try to restore the army. I would be providing weapons directly to the Kurds. I would be not separating Syria and Iraq from each other. They're all ISIS. I would be having a no-fly zone in Syria so we can have the Free Syrian Army have some success. Look, the reason why we're separating Syria and Iraq is because of this incredibly misguided idea that if we get a nuclear agreement with Iran, which will be totally flawed, then therefore the Iranians will cooperate with us. So what's happening is we're bombing ISIS. Meanwhile, Bashar Assad is barrel bombing the Free Syrian Army. That's immoral.
Assad is killing more people than ISIS in Syria at this moment, correct?
Exactly. And we've got 3.5 million refugees and 200,000 dead, 150,000 in Bashar Assad's prisons. This idea that somehow having some kind of working relationship with Iran, who fund Hamas, who have brought Hezbollah into the fight, who have orchestrated terrorist attacks all over, including the latest destabilization of Yemen, is so delusional that it's hard to imagine.
It's Veterans Day, obviously, and you're someone who's always lived your life believing that you could fight for something that's larger than yourself.
Yes.
So what would you say to the American people today in this confrontation is meaningful to Americans across this country and why this fight is larger than all of us?
Every intelligence expert that I know of says that ISIS will pose a direct threat to the United States of America. That's what their commitment is. That's what their belief is. They these thousands that are flocking in from Europe, they go back to Europe. They don't need a visa. They can get on an airplane and fly to the United States of America. Mr. Baghdadi, their leader, was in our camp, prison camp, Camp Bucca in Iraq for 4 years. On his way out, he said, "See you in New York." So they are a direct threat to us, and we have to understand that and take the appropriate action, and not through incremental increases. We have to develop a strategy and then implement that strategy with whatever it takes. Is there anybody in America you know today know what our strategy is? Certainly not members of Congress, certainly not me, and I pay fairly close attention to it. And the president has got to reach out to us and sit down with us and say,
do you think he will now?
I just don't know. I was very disappointed at his first press conference where somehow the dog ate his homework and it's the 2/3 of the people that didn't vote. That one I didn't quite understand. So I hope that he will do what Bill Clinton did, what George W. Bush did after 2006. And that is sit down with us and start working together. And by the way, one of the first things we have to do is get rid of sequestration, which is devastating our military.
You've written a book before we let you go here, and it's Veterans Day, as everybody knows. It's called 13 Soldiers, and it's a fascinating portrayal of 13 different soldiers throughout the course of American history. What would you like to tell us about this effort before
Every
you go?
major conflict we tried to describe in not too much detail. Mark Salter and I, the conflict in which they were engaged. They were young men such as Joseph Martin, who at age 15 joined the Continental Army, to Pete Salter, Mark's father, who fought in Korea, was surrounded by the Chinese, and a brave Native American named Mitchell Red Cloud was tied to a tree to help the others escape. They're ordinary people who did extraordinary things, and some of them not really likable characters, but they all exhibited bravery and commitment. And by the way, to all of our veterans, happy Veterans Day. I'm glad we celebrate our veterans so much as we do today.
And we thank you for your service
Thank
on
you.
this Veterans Day. Senator John McCain, always a pleasure. Good to see you, sir.
Martha.
Well done, Senator. Thanks.